All right, thank you. It's my turn now. Thank you, Barb. That was great. Just a little bit about the Mackinac Center, if you're not familiar with it. We are a Michigan-focused think tank that was founded in 1987, and we're located right down the road here in downtown Midland. And the reason we're in Midland is because of Northwood. Our first president was Larry Reed, and when he was asked if he would move back to Michigan and start up this new think tank, he said, yes, I'll do it, but under one condition. I get to live in Midland, Michigan. And he lived in Midland when he taught economics at Northwood. So we're here because of Northwood. And so thank you for supporting this fine university. Yes, very good. The Mackinac Center is as I said, a think tank. We promote free markets, the rule of law, and a limited and transparent government. And we think ideas are very important. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. And to start, I'm going to have someone more famous and attractive than me explain my main thesis. Now, I will say this video is about 30 seconds long, which, as I understand, is a lot longer than the average TikTok video. So try to stay with it through the whole thing.
What is the most resilient parasite? A bacteria? A virus? An intestinal worm?
What Mr. Cobb is trying to say.
An idea. Resilient, highly contagious. Once an idea has taken hold in the brain, it's almost impossible to eradicate. An idea that is fully formed, fully understood, that sticks. Right in there somewhere.
Yes, that's right, Mr. DiCaprio. Ideas are powerful. Everyone's seen this film, right? Inception. It's a great film. And if you take anything away from that film, that's a good message to take away. Now let's turn to people who are smarter than me. They'll tell you the same thing. Milton, of course, refers to one of our favorite economists, Milton Friedman. He said, public policy is driven by the ideas that are lying around. And another famous economist, John Maynard Keynes, who, if you know anything about economics and know anything about economic thought, you'll recognize that these two guys were not on the same page about lots of things, but they agreed about the importance of ideas. John Maynard Keynes said, the ideas of economists and political philosophers are more powerful than is commonly understood. Indeed, the world is ruled by little else. And if you think back to what you've learned about history, we know this is true, that ideas are very important. Think about ancient Greece in Athens. The Greeks came up with this crazy idea that they could govern themselves. They didn't need a monarch, a strong man to rule over everything. Or the Roman Republic. They came up with this idea that power is dangerous, and if it gets concentrated in one person or one body, it can become tyrannical. And so they created an idea of separation of powers, of keeping a balance between the different powers in government. Or the divine right of kings. How many kings ruled in Europe based on this idea that they were God's appointed ruler of the nation? The Magna Carta in Britain was based on an important idea, that even that king was subject to the law, and that the law was really the main force in society. Or think about the religious wars in the 16th and 17th century in Europe, right? Protestants and Catholics fighting over ideas about who God is and what our duty to God is. Even later, the scientific revolution, the idea that we could use the scientific method to understand the world and learn and generate knowledge about the physical world. The Enlightenment, where humans became introduced to the idea that they could govern themselves through reason, and we could improve our society just through better understanding it and through better reasoning and logic. Or think about, this is a dark shadow on history, but think about the importance of ideas when it comes to the communist revolutions, right? The ideas of Marx and Engels, that history is on a certain path and that the proletariats will rise up against the bourgeoisie and the workers will revolt. Think of the tens of millions of people who were impacted and who died as a result of those ideas. Arthur Schlesinger Jr. was right when he said, ideas are the great forces of history. He didn't say a great force. He said the great forces. And so some of you might be knowing where this is heading. Ideas are what drove the American Revolution from 250 years ago. And how do we know this? Well, the founding fathers said so themselves. This is John Adams writing to Hezekiah Niles in 1808. And he said, the revolution was effected before the war commenced. The revolution was in the minds and hearts of the people. This radical change in principles, opinions, and sentiments and affections of the people was the real American Revolution. Just so you're aware, people who are grammatically inclined, that affected is not misspelled there. That's how he spelled it back then, so just so you know. Does anyone know Hezekiah Niles? Has anyone heard of him before? He was famous, and the reason John Adams was writing to him, because he was an editor of a very popular magazine in the country at the time. Now, does anyone know any famous magazine editors today? Can anyone even name a magazine editor? Can anyone even name a magazine? Maybe a couple, okay. My point is that only in a highly literate society and in a society that is interested and driven by ideas would someone like the editor of a magazine become famous, right? That's Hezekiah Niles. And by the way, has anyone heard of Niles, Michigan? That's named after him, okay? There's more evidence that the American Revolution was driven by ideas. And it comes from this book that was published in 1967 called The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution, written by Bernard Bailyn. And what his thesis was that ideas were the reason why the colonists broke away from Britain. Some of you might be thinking, wait a minute here, 1967, it took until 1967 for historians to figure out that ideas were important to the American Revolution? The answer is yes and no. The problem is historians are a bit of a cultish bunch. They are subject to getting obsessed with fads from time to time. I can say this because I studied history, and so I know a lot of historians. And at the time, historians were doing everything to show all the other reasons besides ideas that drove the colonists to revolt against Britain. So they were studying and making arguments about, it was really just the colonists' economic self-interest that drove them to revolt against Britain. Because, you know, all the founding fathers they're wealthy, and Washington had his plantation, and so did Jefferson. And really what they were about was they just wanted to expand their wealth and concentrate their wealth. And they also interpreted the American Revolution from a Marxist perspective and said, no, this is really about the proletariat, who didn't really exist at the time, but the proletariat of the poor farmers and the indentured servants and the slaves, who they really pushed the founding fathers to revolt against the British. And it wasn't ideas. Ideas were just propaganda that the wealthy and the elites used to justify revolting against Britain. And Bailyn proved them all wrong, though, and he did it in a very simple way. He went and read what the colonists themselves said about their relationship with Great Britain and what their reasonings were for revolting. He read through 400 different pamphlets that were printed and disseminated across the colonies, and they were well read by a majority of the population. So they give you a very good insight into what the people were thinking and what kind of arguments and debates that they were having through publishing these different pamphlets. He went back to the primary sources. I wonder what he would study today if he was trying to do something similar. I think he might study the social media accounts of maybe the most popular influencers in the country. It would be something like that. And what he found when he read these pamphlets is that the public, the common people, the everyday people, not just the elites, they believed that government tended to increase its power naturally, and that this was a threat to their ability, to their liberties, and that England was showing signs of this power growing in Britain and being concentrated in the person of the king. And this is why they wanted to revolt from the British. The colonists' ideas about liberty, self-governance, separation of powers, rule of law, the things that we hold as kind of the building blocks of our government system, those are what motivated them to revolt against the British. And if you think about it, this has to be the answer, right? Because why else would someone pledge their life and sacred honor? Why would they go and be willing to die as a result of this revolution? It's because they believed so fervently in these ideas. And everyone now agrees that Bernard Bailyn was right. And I know this because he got awarded a medal by President Obama. So obviously, that's evidence right there that he was very important indeed. Now, what does this have to do with us today? Well, nothing has changed. Ideas still drive politics, and they still drive policy. This is Joe Overton. Has everyone heard of this term, the Overton window? Yeah, a few of you? Okay. Joe, this is well known now in political science and is used as a way of understanding politics. Joe Overton was the executive vice president at the Mackinac Center until he tragically died in a plane crash in 2003. And he came up with this idea that he called the window of political possibilities. We later called it the Overton window after him. And he was trying to explain to donors, to potential donors to the Mackinac Center, why they should support us. And what he said was, politicians are limited in the types of policies that they promote. They only support policies that they think the public will accept and that they think voters will accept and in response vote for them for office. But those aren't all the ideas that are out there. There's a whole range of ideas that politicians don't ever talk about and don't support. And that's where think tanks come in, because think tanks try to educate the public and educate policymakers about the ideas that are not politically popular right now or that politicians aren't talking about. And so we try to expand and move the Overton window. So on the, I guess it's on your left, here's an example of a policy through the lens of the Overton window, education policy. So 40 years ago, there were 0 states in America who allowed for private school vouchers or for a similar type of scholarship program where poor parents could get public support if they wanted to send their kid to a private school. No politician supported that policy. Today, half of the states in the US have programs like that. that give poor parents support to send their kids to private schools, alternative to the public schools. That's because of the Overton window. The Overton window moved, and now that became politically possible. Marijuana legalization is another great example. 30 years ago, the only people supporting legalizing marijuana were crazy libertarians. And I can say that because I'm sort of a libertarian and I'm sort of crazy. Today, half the states have legalized marijuana. And I think almost all of the states allow it for some medicinal use, at least. So that's the Overton window at work. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the idea of legalizing marijuana was not in the Overton window. And today, that window has shifted and moved, and now politicians support that policy, and we have it enacted in many states across the country. One of my favorite quotes that sums up the Overton window is that politicians are like corks on an ocean of public opinion. They just move wherever public opinion moves. So what that means is, what the Overton window teaches us is that the public is really in charge of what policies politicians eventually support. We're in charge of it, which is why organizations like think tanks really matter, and why institutions matter. I just selected a couple at random here to show you. You may have heard of some of these. Northwood and Mackinac Center are important because we deal with issues, we develop and debate and defend ideas that are not necessarily politically popular at any time, that aren't sponsored by politicians or a political party. And these are the ways we advance our society and move forward and come up with solutions to new problems and expand liberty and freedom and grow wealth, is through new ideas, developing them and defending them, which is similar to what the founders did when they shifted their Overton window to include revolting against the British. Thank you for your time. I'll take questions for a few minutes now.